I was stacking the new arrivals on the corner table when she walked in, light brushing against the glass door, the soft click of her heels on the floor. She paused, glanced around, and then, as if deciding the right aisle, made her way toward the fiction section. I recognized her immediately. Mrs. Patel, my neighbor's mom. The one who had taught me how to fold an origami crane when I was 10 and then forgot all about it until last week. She didn't notice me at first. I watched her hands. The way she lightly folded her napkin on the small cafe table she claimed near the window. A little crease here, a tilt there. The precision was quiet but deliberate, like she'd done it 100 times, yet the pause before she spoke gave away something deeper. Hesitation, maybe. "Morning, Rohan," she said finally, soft, careful, as if testing the words in her mouth before letting them go. "Morning," I replied, fumbling with the stack of books like it was a shield. I helped her carry a couple of paperbacks to her table. She held out her hand, brushing mine lightly as I placed the books down. The touch was brief, accidental, deliberate. It was impossible to tell which. My hand lingered a second too long, caught in the memory of her palm, warm and certain. "You always know which ones I like," she said, half smile, eyes flicking toward the books, and then back to me, but not really. I shrugged. "I remember from last time." The words sounded smaller than I meant them to. She laughed softly, a quiet sound that didn't disturb the cafe, but it made the silence around us feel denser. I noticed the way her fingers traced the rim of the coffee cup, just the tips, as if it were fragile enough to shatter at the wrong touch. I wondered if she felt the same hesitation I did, the quiet, hungry sort that lingered in the space between two people who'd known each other too long to be strangers, but not long enough to be comfortable. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over the screen, an unsent message. Blinking like a ghost. Texting her would be absurd. Inane. Maybe unwanted. Still, I wanted to. I didn't. She cleared her throat and looked at me. "Thanks for helping with the garden yesterday." Her voice carried a weight I couldn't place. Gratitude? Something else? I smiled, but it was nervous, the kind that stretches the skin but doesn't reach the eyes. "It's nothing." I was around. Her eyes lingered on mine, just for a fraction longer than a polite pause. And then, unexpectedly, she touched my hand again. A brush, a press, almost a question. My chest thumped against my ribs like a nervous drummer. For a moment, all I could do was notice the space between us, the quiet heat of the room, the ticking clock on the wall, the faint smell of roasted coffee beans. I wanted to say something, but the words scattered before they left my mouth. She glanced at her watch, then at the window, then back at me. "I should get going," she murmured. But she didn't stand immediately. There was a pause, an almost imperceptible hesitation, like the air was holding its breath. I wanted to ask her to stay a little longer. But I nodded, and she gathered her things. Her hand brushed mine one last time, lighter than a whisper. I didn't pull away. I didn't move. Outside, the sunlight caught her hair just so, and I thought I saw her glance back, almost expecting me to wave. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out. A message, new, unsent, or maybe just arrived. "Thanks for today. I appreciated it." I stared at it. My fingers hovered. I didn't know if I should reply or leave it alone. And just like that, she was gone, leaving behind the quiet echo of her presence, the warmth of her hand, and the impossible weight of not knowing what any of it meant. A few days later, I found myself helping her carry groceries from the street to her kitchen. The sun was warm, the air sticky, and my arms full of bags I probably shouldn't have been strong enough to carry. She laughed when a carton of milk slipped, and for a second, I thought the sound would follow me home. "I always manage to make a mess of the simplest things," she said, shaking her head. But her eyes softened when they met mine, and there was a hint of something unsaid, a vulnerability I hadn't noticed before. "You're not messy," I said. "You just have things to juggle." She looked away, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I guess. I never realized how exhausting it is to do it all alone until now." Her words hit me in a quiet way, a reminder of how grown-up and complicated her world was. She didn't have to explain further. I felt the weight in the small pause, in the way her hands lingered over the counter, pressing lightly, as if steadying herself. We settled in the kitchen with tea, the steam curling between us like it carried the space we couldn't fill with words. I watched her fingers wrap around the cup, the slight tremor when she thought no one was watching. I wanted to reach out, to steady them, but I stayed still, pretending to check my phone. I remember when I used to come to this corner store as a kid, she said suddenly, eyes distant. I used to pick out the candies I wasn't allowed to eat, just for the thrill of it. My mom would yell at me, but I thought I was clever. She smiled softly, but there was a shadow there, a quiet loneliness beneath the memory. I nodded, trying not to let my voice shake. I think everyone has those moments. She glanced at me, and for a heartbeat, I felt like she was looking past the surface, past the 20-year gap, past the polite distance of neighborly manners. There was something raw there, something fleeting. I imagined what it would feel like to say it aloud. The things I'd caught myself thinking in stolen glances, the warmth that settled in my chest whenever she touched my hand. I imagined telling her, hearing her laugh nervously, or maybe staring at me the way she had last week, unsure what to do with the silence. But I didn't. I swallowed it down, letting it curl into my chest like smoke. The silence stretched, filled with only the faint tick of the wall clock. She lifted her hand, brushing her fingers against mine by accident, or maybe on purpose, and I felt the weight of it, heavier than any grocery bag. A shared smile flickered, quick, almost shy. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. I thought, watching her sip tea, maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. She caught my gaze for a fraction longer than necessary. A soft, knowing smile curved her lips, and the room seemed to hold its breath with us. It was late afternoon when I found her in the garden, kneeling by the rose bushes, pruning scissors in hand. The sun had softened, spilling gold over the fence, and the air smelled faintly of soil and blooming petals. "Need a hand?" I asked, though part of me already knew she didn't. She shook her head, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No, it's fine." But her voice trailed off, caught somewhere between politeness and something else. I felt it, the hesitation, the almost there warmth that didn't quite settle. I crouched beside her anyway, pretending to inspect the soil, my fingers brushing against hers as we reached for the same branch. The contact lingered, electric in its subtlety. She didn't pull away immediately, just shifted slightly, enough to break the angle, but not the feeling. "You're good at this," I said, unsure if I meant the gardening or the way she seemed to hold herself with quiet patience. She didn't answer right away. She leaned back on her heels, letting the sun catch her face, and for a moment, I could have sworn she looked at me differently. Then her gaze flicked away to the fence, the street, anything but me. I imagined what it would feel like to just reach for her, to close the small gap between us. To hear her laugh, maybe nervous, maybe soft, maybe shaking her head at me, and then nothing. My hand hovered near hers for a fraction. Too long. She noticed, I knew, but she didn't make a move either. The quiet of the garden was broken by the faint sound of my neighbor, her son, coming back from practice. Footsteps on the gravel. My heart lurched. I pulled back slightly, suddenly aware of the age between us, the risk, the casual eyes that could misunderstand. "Rohan," she called softly, just as if testing my name. I froze, caught mid-thought. Her eyes met mine again, a flash of something unspoken, maybe longing, maybe hesitation. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words scattered before I could catch them. I cleared my throat, focusing on the pruning scissors. Yeah, just looking." She nodded, small, tight, and then leaned a little closer. Not enough to cross the line, but enough that I could feel the warmth of her shoulder. My pulse picked up, and my chest felt tight. A breath too long, a silence too heavy. I imagined the next moment. Our faces inching closer, the sun catching her eyes, the slight tilt of her head, but it ended in a blink. She stood, brushing dirt from her knees, holding herself straight. The near touch lingered in the air, the almost confession hanging like a weight neither of us was ready to carry. "Tea," she said abruptly, a lifeline, a diversion. My fingers itched, wanting to reach, to speak, to stay in that stretch of almost. But I nodded, silent, following her back inside, the garden empty behind us, holding the echo of what nearly happened. It was raining lightly when I saw her sitting on the park bench, the hood of her coat pulled low, a book resting on her lap. I hesitated at the path, umbrella half raised, feeling the wet chill settle into my sleeves. She looked up and gave a small, almost guilty smile. "Didn't think anyone would come," she said, voice soft, not quite expecting an answer. I shrugged, sliding the umbrella down to let the rain sprinkle lightly over my hair. I was passing by. My words felt clumsy, insufficient for what I wanted to say. We sat side by side, the space between us tight, yet fragile. She folded the book and tucked it under her arm, glancing at the wet sidewalk. Her fingers lingered near mine for a moment, brushing over the edge of the bench. I wanted to reach, to close that tiny distance, but I stayed still. "Do you ever feel guilty?" she asked, almost to herself, and then her eyes caught mine. "For noticing things you probably shouldn't?" I swallowed. My chest tightened. "Sometimes. More than I should." There was a pause, the rain tapping a steady rhythm against the umbrella and pavement. My thoughts spun. What would happen if I told her everything I'd felt these past weeks? How small it all seemed, yet heavy in my chest. The age gap, the reality of her being my neighbor's mom, the danger of being misunderstood, all pressing in. A jogger passed, and she laughed softly at his soaked jacket, shaking her head. But the sound felt hollow in the shadowed park. "I caught myself looking at you too much," I said finally, voice low, almost breaking. "And I can't not notice." I trailed off, unsure if the words had made it to her. She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes went to the horizon, the wet trees, then back to me, and I saw it. Hesitation, fear, desire tangled in a single look. Her lips parted slightly, as if she wanted to say something, maybe to reach for me, maybe to pull away. I shouldn't," she whispered, voice trembling, quiet enough that I had to lean closer to hear. "You're young, and I don't know what I'm doing." I felt the heat of her words settle in my chest. The confession, half-formed, vulnerable, dangerous. I wanted to lean forward, to hold her hand properly this time, to tell her it was okay. But instead, I stayed, letting the silence stretch between us, pregnant and heavy. The rain slowed, leaving droplets clinging to the edges of the bench. I wanted to ask her if this was a mistake, or if it was something worth risking. My tongue caught on the question before it met. She tilted her head toward me, eyes searching mine, waiting for something she didn't name. And then she spoke, softer this time. "Do you ever think about what could happen?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My fingers itched to reach for hers again, but the air between us was thick with hesitation, with longing, with the weight of all the things we weren't allowed to say. The bench felt small, the world narrowed down to her and me, the rain, the almost touch that neither of us crossed. And then nothing, just the question hanging, unanswered, as if the park itself was holding its breath. The week after the park, she was different. Not cold, not exactly, but guarded. Her smiles came slower, her glances shorter. I showed up at her door with groceries one evening, the bag heavy, the anticipation heavier. She opened it, hands tucked into her coat pockets. "Oh, you didn't have to," she said, voice neutral. No warmth in the brush of her fingers against mine. "I thought, maybe you'd like a snack," I said, trying to sound casual. She nodded, barely meeting my eyes, and closed the door a second too quickly. I lingered on the threshold, feeling the sudden emptiness, the tiny shift in the gravity between us. I kept showing up. A dropped book here, a brief hello there. And each time, she would smile, but it felt distant, like a window I couldn't reach. I imagined she was thinking about someone else, an ex, a child, something I didn't know, something I couldn't compete with. The thought made my chest tight in a way I didn't understand. One night, I walked past her kitchen window. She was on the phone, nodding, smiling faintly. Yes, I'll handle it. She paused, looked down at the counter, and ran a hand over it, hesitating. "I'll see you tomorrow," she said. I froze, heart clenching. Tomorrow. Who was she talking to? The line cut, and she stayed there a moment, leaning against the counter, silent. I watched until she moved away, leaving me standing in the dark street. At the café the next morning, she ordered her usual, but she sat with her back to the window. I wanted to catch her eye, wanted to bridge the invisible distance, but she didn't glance my way. The waitress placed a small plate in front of me, my order, without looking. I stirred my coffee slowly, feeling the space between us stretch longer than the hours. I imagined the reasons. She had a past I didn't know, obligations I couldn't reach, boundaries she had drawn before I even stepped close. I imagined all the ways this could end before it began, all the ways I could be hurt if I pressed. I thought about sending her a message, Just a small one. I hope you're okay. My thumb hovered over the screen, frozen. I didn't. Days passed. The garden grew untended. The roses drooped. The books I had meant to lend her sat on my desk. And I didn't knock. I didn't text. I just waited, unsure if waiting meant patience or defeat. Sitting alone, I realized it wasn't heartbreak, not really. It was something stranger. A limbo, a quiet pause, as if the universe had stopped mid-sentence. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. And so I sat, watching the clock tick, the café hum, the rain collect in the gutter outside, waiting for a door that might never open, for a word that might never arrive. It was evening when I found her in the kitchen, the light low, warm over the counters. She was washing dishes, the faucet dripping steadily, a rhythm I could almost follow. I hesitated at the doorway, unsure if I should speak or turn around. "You're here," she said, not looking up. Just a statement, no judgment. I nodded, letting the silence stretch, heavy but not uncomfortable. I set the small bag of groceries on the counter. "I wanted to check if you needed anything," I said. The words felt awkward, exposed, carrying more than they should. She finally met my eyes, and in them, I saw the same hesitation I felt, the same unspoken pull. "You didn't have to," she whispered, tone soft, almost fragile. I stepped closer. My hand brushed hers as I moved a bowl into the sink. The contact was light, deliberate, the kind that says more than any confession could. Her eyes lingered on my fingers, then on mine, searching, weighing, measuring. I've been meaning to say something." I started, voice low, uneven. My throat felt tight. "About everything. About these weeks. About noticing you." I trailed off, unsure if I had the courage to continue. She didn't interrupt. She just turned her head slightly, letting me find the words, or fail at them. "I can't not notice," I said finally, quieter, almost to myself. "Even if I should. Even if it's complicated." Her breath caught, just a fraction, and she set the dish down. Her hands folded together, fingers twisting slightly. She looked at me, really looked, and in that pause, I felt the weight of all the almost, and maybe we'd skirted around. "I know," she said softly. "I feel it too." The words were small, restrained, but they carried everything. Fear, longing, guilt, desire. We didn't move closer immediately. We just stood, the kitchen humming around us. I reached out, almost on instinct, and she let me touch her hand. Our fingers intertwined lightly, a quiet agreement without sound. A slow smile formed on her lips, careful, real. "Okay," she murmured. Not a promise, not an ending, just acknowledgement. A bridge over the distance we'd built between ourselves. I let the tension fall away, not with a grand gesture, but with a small, human connection. Just our hands, just her eyes, just the sound of the faucet and the warmth that settled around us. I realized then that this was what I wanted, not a declaration, not a sudden leap into something reckless, but the honesty of presence, the courage to stand with someone and let them see you, and to see them in return. The kitchen felt smaller, softer. Time slowed. The rain outside had stopped, leaving only the faint smell of wet earth and the quiet pulse of life inside. And I knew, without needing to speak it, that for now, this simple, fragile connection was enough. Weeks passed. The mornings came and went with their usual rhythms. I'd arrive at the cafe around 8:47 a.m., the old clock above the counter ticking steadily, and she would already be there, black coffee steaming between her hands. No grand gestures, no announcements, just presence. I noticed small changes in her. The way she folded her napkin now carried less hesitation, more ease. She laughed quietly at my half-baked jokes, eyes flicking toward mine as if confirming I was still here, still noticing. I didn't need more than that. Our routines became threads weaving through ordinary life. Sometimes we met on the bench in the small park, sharing tea instead of coffee, letting silence stretch comfortably between us. Sometimes it was just passing each other in the doorway, a smile, a nod, a brush of hands, so simple, so profound. The garden, once left to droop, now thrived under her careful tending. I'd help occasionally, carrying a watering can or trimming a stray branch, our fingers brushing over the soil, over leaves, over each other's hands. No declarations, no promises, just attention, patience, care. I remembered the first touch, the way her hand had lingered in mine that rainy afternoon. It hadn't led to a dramatic confession or sudden revelation. Instead, it had grown slowly, quietly, into the steady warmth of being allowed to matter to someone. There were mornings when I still paused over my phone, thumb hovering over a message I could send, or not. But now, the unsent words felt lighter, less urgent, because the connection wasn't measured in texts or gestures of drama. It was measured in the small, consistent ways she let me see her, and I let her see me. One Saturday, she made tea and sat across from me at the kitchen table. Sunlight spilled over the counter, warm and lazy. We didn't speak much. Our hands met briefly over the sugar jar, and her eyes held mine for a long second. "Okay," she said softly. Not an announcement, not a label, just acknowledgement. A word that carried everything we'd navigated. Hesitation, longing, mistakes, near confessions, and finally, quiet trust. I smiled, because yes, it was enough. It was more than enough. Life didn't have to shout or tremble. Life just had to be here, in small gestures, morning coffees, and shared silences. Walking home later, the memory of the park bench, the 8:47 a.m. coffee, the black coffee, the touches over books and plants, came back to me. Not as longing, not as regret, not as a story unfinished, but as proof. Proof that what mattered most was not the leap or the confession, but the steady, patient presence of someone choosing to stay. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel paused. I felt grounded, warm, held, not by grand acts or sudden declarations, but by the quiet, patient certainty of someone who understood. I didn't need to say it aloud. She knew, and I knew. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?